your official title is Guthrie, but I mean, the dude played in the NFL, whether you're going to say how long it was or not, but played in the NFL for a little bit, runs a department, is a dad, is a husband, and that's kind of what we were talking about off air. As you run a department, how are you able to balance the things, that are required of you in your job, but also required of you in your job as a dad and a husband?
That's been one of the biggest learnings. I think I've been in this position for 15 months or a little more so now, and really trying to figure that out. It's not, you don't balance. We've talked about, there's no work-life balance because the priorities are different, right? The family and my wife and my child are more important at the end of the day. If I get fired tomorrow, they're going to post a new position for the next director of strength and conditioning here, and that's their duty, but that doesn't happen with family. They're not getting a replacement. So
They're not just like, hey, you know what? We're going to
yeah,
fire you and find a new dad and a husband. Like,
sometimes they like that, but no, that doesn't happen. And so trying to keep that in perspective and prioritize that has been kind of one of the things I'm trying to get better at. It's not perfect. It's kind of drinking through a fire hose when you come in, starting, especially for me, I was an assistant for 8.5 years and then finally getting an opportunity to run the department. So trying to learn how to do that in a new city across the country, with not many friends in the area. Fortunately, my wife's family is 3.5 hours away, in the same state, which is nice. My parents will come to visit for like 3 weeks at a time,
oh wow.
all the way from Iowa. So that's great, but it's been a challenge for us, and so that's an area that we're trying to improve at daily, right?
Yeah, no. The big thing that stood out to me right there is when you talked about being an assistant for 8.5 years and then getting to run the show. So for any of our listeners out there that multiple positions, hey, they just became in charge and they're like, oh fuck, what do I do? They're looking to you for a piece of advice right now. Or if there's somebody that's in year 6, year 7, year 5 as an assistant, like, man, when am I going to get my break? When am I going to get my break? What do you say to that person that's been an assistant for a while, wondering, is it ever going to come to fruition? And then what do you say to the person that just took over and is in charge?
Yeah, I was never one that was like, oh, I want to be a director at a Power Five, or I want to work with football or basketball, or any one thing. So that's where I really just tried to be where my feet were and make that a big time where I'm at. That's kind of a cliche, but
Good book
really
too.
enjoyed.
Really
Yeah,
good book.
enjoyed the work where I was, at UIC. I had a great relationship with my boss, Nick Sistatis. Kind of started out there as an unpaid intern, then a paid intern, and then a full time. Got my master's there, and so had a really great opportunity to grow and develop with him and the department there. Um, and so I didn't at that point. I didn't have family. I didn't have I love Chicago and the city. I didn't need anything else, right? I love the teams I was working with and the work day to day. But then you get a relationship, and then you have a kid, you get married, things change. And so it was time to kind of start looking for that next step. And we'd had some changes administratively, and they had brought in Mike Schweigert, kind of from Northwestern. He oversaw the department, and kind of we're starting to go a different direction. And so I was able to take kind of things from both Nick and Mike to bring forward. And so one of the things, reflecting back on that transition from school to school, I don't think we did a good enough job promoting ourselves as a department. And I don't mean like social media self promotion, but within the university or within the administration. And so, like, I think our students knew we did good work, our coaches, but at the end of the day, there was a disconnect between administration and strength and conditioning, which I think can happen often, talking to other colleagues around. And so I'm really focused on how we can grow that and keep that relationship strong here. Coming in, that was a big focus, but then also, growing the communication and between strength and conditioning, athletic training, the sport coaches, and growing that from here. Because one of our challenges is we have 3 weight rooms in 2 different buildings
Wow.
across it's like 3 miles between buildings. So some of my staff I
Oh
don't
my
see all the
God.
time, right? So,
Yeah, that's not easy.
and then our coaches' offices might be across the street in townhomes or at the other, the Mount Vernon campus. And so, really trying to find ways for our staff to be intentional about their communication and try to promote that is huge.
How do you, and you know what, as I hear you saying it, like obviously it's difficult because it's not what I'm used to now. But I remember Brian Phillips when he was at JMU, he was talking that he had multiple weight rooms and trying to do a better job. So the reason I'm saying all this is some of our listeners out there are in that position, whether they're directors or they're assistants. What's your piece of advice on how to be really intentional with your communication to keep everybody on the same page to then serve the athletes?
Yeah, the strategies I've tried to use, and it's still updating and iterating and always trying to get better at it, because you get busy being busy doing the day to day, and so that's an area as I'm the basketball season is ended and trying to shift into kind of the off season mode, but then also keep the director part of my job at the forefront as well. But some of the tactics have been weekly emails or periodic emails, updating all the stakeholders in the goings on of sports performance. So, kind of a template that we have for our staff is, what has been done in the recent last week, any data updates, good or bad, and then kind of highlight or like what's to come, the weight room insight, that way the sport coaches you should be talking to daily anyways.
Yeah.
But same thing with athletic trainers, but keeping the sport admins in the loop, keeping the academics in the loop, what's going on, because the weight room can be a scary place. There's guys like us with beards and tattoos and loud music and yelling. But it doesn't have to be that way in terms of like letting them in terms of, how we operate, making sure they understand that there is a scientific basis backing to what we do. It's not just, grunting and lifting more weights. It's a fun part of it, but there is actually a rationale and behind how we're operating.
Let's dive into that. What is your philosophy as a director? How do you go about educating the staff that you have? Like, okay, this is how we're going to train the athletes that we have here. Like, these are the movements we're for sure never going to do, or like, do you have things like that? Because, when I was at Harvard, Frage was like, listen, we're not pulling from the floor, right? And they used to when they were with Fit. So like, have you done things of that nature? Where are you at with that?
No, I'm much more autonomy within structure. So we're fortunate. We have 3 GAs, 3 full-time staff right now, and they're basically the head strength coaches of their teams. So no one has more than 3 teams. And as long as they're not doing anything crazy, they're good to go. Right. I gained a lot of benefit from that as my time when I was starting out. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that within reason. Right. It might not work for everyone, but for us, we have high level practitioners. When I came in, they're already doing it. They just hadn't had a director for a year or plus. And so just kind of needed that commander's intent. The biggest focus on my side is creating common language. So making sure cleaning up our team builder, all the exercises and getting all that, making sure we're speaking that same language first in our department, but then with athletic trainers, with sport coaches, making sure that they are understanding the difference between, like incline bench press and incline row, like getting that stuff, organized has been a big project.
As you get things organized, how many members on your high performance team are there? Do you guys have a nutritionist, athletic training, sports psychology? How have you been able to assimilate all of those aspects, where you're at?
Right now, there are 6 strength and conditioning coaches or sports performance. We're, kind of changing our name as to be that. We're fortunate we have a good number of athletic trainers. My direct supervisor, Chris Hennelly, has been here 27 years first as an athletic trainer.
Wow,
and now
that's long.
Now it's funny because he was athletic trainer when Tanya, our athletic director, was an athlete here. And
Shut up. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. So you never know what athlete might be your boss someday. So treat them well. And so he kind of oversees student athlete health, wellness, and performance as my supervisor. And so within that, we've had nutritionists in the past part-time. Psychology, the mental health is a huge priority for us. So I currently don't have in-house, but we're looking at options in terms of bringing in both the nutrition and the sports psychology. I'm not that I'm uninterested in the mental health, but for the performance side, I'm interested in that as well.
How would you go about rolling it out? And let's say in a perfect world, you already had it. What would, like, speak to those that have it and kind of give them some guidance in your perfect world as, you know, what you would like to see it
from like a department and that high performance model.
Yeah,
I think it's a great question, because you look at like the highest level, but there's still teams that have injuries, teams that people fall through the cracks. So I think just getting everyone in the same room, that's one of our challenges, is just getting meetings more often. Like my wife doesn't understand that we don't have like shared or we have a shared calendar, but like you can't put yourself on someone else's calendar, which happens all the time in her work. So just like trying to create the system to facilitate some of those things, whether it's like checklists, and that's really the focus right now. I would say, I really think we could bring more people in, but I want to make sure we're doing really good with the people we do have, if that makes sense. So like making sure we're taking care of our house first in terms of strength and conditioning. Are we providing the best service? Are we, you know, getting people stronger, faster, fitter? And then we can worry about some of those other, you know, bigger picture issues. Not that they're obviously interconnected, but like get the big rocks first.
One of the questions I had as you were talking about that was, I know from, you know, on the site that you do a great job with, you know, staff evals, and, you know, how did that get created? All right, for those that aren't members, you know, they'll get access to this right here because it'll be on YouTube. But how do you go about evaluating your staff so that way they can continue to learn, so that way we can push the field forward? Because the more standardized, you know, assessments are, the better it is for everybody.
Yeah, that's a big part of my role, I feel like, is their development. And a couple of the pieces that I've integrated is, I think I got them from Mike Silbernagel, who's at University of Mary. When I got the position, called him because he's been there. He started the department from no strength coaches. So, and now he has like 3 or 4 graduate assistants and full-time assistants at a D2. Is really, you know, someone I look up to, and connected through Nick. And so there's kind of 2 parts to it. First is a self-eval that the strength coach and myself will go over periodically, maybe 2 to 3 times a year. And it's kind of not a quadrant, but a rubric in different areas like communication, equipment, and like maintenance, education, and then like programming. And so like there's kind of 3 levels: above expectations, meet expectations, and below. And then there's certain criteria within that that we can just talk through. And they fill it out, and then we meet and go over it. Like, hey, what's holding you back from this area? What do you need? All right, you're not reading enough. What are some strategies to help do that? And then the second piece of that is the sport coach eval for the strength and conditioning staff. And it's not evaluating, you know, the basketball coach isn't evaluating me on my ability to get people stronger or faster, because that's for my supervisor or us as strength coaches to determine. But it's more, how well are we communicating? How are we working with the athletic trainer? Are we interested in the sport? Are we, you know, an extension of the staff? Are we meeting with recruits? And so that's been a nice way, just send out after each team's competitive season to get feedback and then start conversations, both for myself individually with the sport coach, but then with the staff member as well, to kind of get their sense of it. You take it, you know, the context is important, who it's coming from, what their experience is or has been. Is what's one of the things we've had a lot. When you have 3 GAs, you're going to have turnover, but then even, you know, in college athletics in general, right, there's a lot of turnover. And so trying to create that stability from my side is important. Like one of I think our water polo has had like 5 strength coaches in 2 years.
Wow.
And so trying to create some consistency with that And it's various factors, right? There's many things with that was well before my time. So trying to create that stability and then consistency through just kind of my role.
Speaking, you said water polo. I know you also work with gymnastics. You mentioned that. For our listeners out there that are like, okay, dude, how do you train water polo? Like, and there's been a lot of times where people, I'll never forget this from, oh gosh, I forget his name. Brian, who just did the swim presentation. He's like, look, you get to be an assistant with football, but you have to be the head swim strength coach. I feel like that's the case with a lot of these other sports, and I love swim and dive. Worked with them here in 2019, fell in love with them. One of the things, that I'm kind of rambling on is how did you start working with obscure teams or teams that are not as, traditionally thought of needing the weight room? How did you do a really good job working with them? And then how do you educate your staff that maybe, like you said, this turnover, and if they're working with a team they've never worked with before, how do you educate them so then that way our listeners can be like, all right, this is what I need to do?
Yeah, it's really, for me, my experience, like when I started at UIC, I was a paid intern because they had created that position because they started the women's soccer program in 2013. They had 5 women training all that year. So it was me and 5 of them. They were doing like 2-on-2 like all year, like crazy.
That's like me and the throwers right now. There's only 3 of them. There's 3 throwers on this roster.
Yeah. And so like the next year they brought in, 21 freshmen or recruits to start the competitive program. But that was my first team. And then I had women's golf and women's gymnastics. And so the only team I could actually see compete was gymnastics. And so the biggest thing, we actually were talking about it today on a GA interview is like getting out to the sport practice or getting out to the competitions when you can really helps a lot, both for learning a sport you don't know, like Isaac Avon, who works with our water polo. He didn't know much he knew of water polo, but nothing about the specifics. So he'll go to practice. He went to every meet he could. That also gets a lot of buy-in in terms of from the athletes, because they see that you're not just a weight room person. So that's something we try to value, but also guarding our time. You're not going to be at every practice, because that's too much.
You're not able to do that. But like you said, how do you balance that dichotomy?
Yeah, it doesn't take a lot of investment from your side, I don't think, to see how invested you are, for the athletes to see how invested you are. And then the actual mechanics of it, of course, needs analysis, doing research on the sport, watching it online. Because that's one of it with our interns we try to do is like assign them a weird sport that's not normal, like they don't see, like Aussie rules football. We've done sevens rugby. We did boxing one year. So like different mixed stuff like that they don't really know about. Gaelic football, but the principles in most sports are the same. In turn, 80 to 90% of what you're going to do is probably similar, right? So trying to take that, but then how you coach in that room might be a little different with gymnastics than you are with golf, than you are with football or basketball or soccer, right? So trying to learn those team cultures, sport cultures, but also the team culture quickly and get on board with that has helped.
One of the things that I also wanted to, part of the reason I had you on was I kind of wanted to know, like, what's your passion? How do you continue to do what you do? Because I think you do run a department at a very high level, right? And you said you've only been doing it for 15 months. Like, how have you been able to, whether you'll admit it or not, like, you don't have to, I'll say it. How, like, what's your processes? Like, what's your why? How have you been able to be, again, and I think so successful in the time doing what you've been doing?
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. So it doesn't always feel successful, but when you're in the thick of it, but really, I'd say still building the processes. I think eating the elephant one bite at a time, that's been like a mantra this last year, because like you come on and it's drinking through a fire hose. So just trying to really prioritize, like we have a Trello that we share, but then I made my own.
Oh, what? Sorry, I'm gonna interrupt.
It's called Trello, Trello. It's basically like an organizational platform.
Okay.
It's like almost like a dashboard. You can like pin different things, and you can share them. You can like make checklists. That's been really helpful. That like we have a shared staff one, so all our passwords, all our like cleaning tasks, supplement tracking, all that stuff is on there. But then I have my own for a director one. Then I can have my own, notes and kind of a note taking and organizational. So just using strategies like that, but trying to find what's important, what's urgent, and differentiate between those, because there's always more to do. There's always more projects I could work on. There's more programming, more everything. And so that's been kind of probably, I would say, a struggle. I feel like it's been a struggle, whether it looks like that or not. I'm the duck, calm on the surface, but pedaling like hell underneath, right? So, yeah, that's kind of been my process. That's really helped is like that chunking and just like biting smaller bites.
Another question that I had, and part of the reason I wanted to have you on, and I think any of our people that are in that dual role like you're in, what's it like being in any of those higher level administrative meetings and then, going back down onto the floor of like, working with the athletes, maybe knowing things that they can't know yet and having privy information? Like, how do you handle that and manage just all of that while still having, the basketball team there? Like that can't be easy to do.
Yeah, I think it's just trying to be your best self in that moment, like the best version of yourself. So like on our wall inside, I think got from Molly Benetti at South Carolina. We have it on the inside of the office before we walk onto the floor. It's like, who does this person or team need me to be in this moment? There's two other things I'm blanking right now, but like, am I going to be them? And then like, basically put yourself in that mindset when you're heading out there. I think is really good, because other things with our interns, we've sent them like WWE promo tapes and like, watch this, like, because I'm naturally an introverted person. I don't really get energy from people. But guess what? I'm around people all day. And so sometimes you have to kind of put that, not mask on, but play that best version of yourself for that team that needs that. Like women's gymnastics, 7 a.m., they may not love it, but they've created a culture where they're just yelling, let's go G-Dub, and the whole time encouraging each other, because that's the standard that their coach has set. And so for me, that's like chicken soup for a strength coach's soul. I don't have to do much. It's just protect that culture. But some of the other sports that I've worked with, you might have to do a little more in that role and bring that up, be the thermometer, not the thermostat. And so just trying to think about those things before you take a breath, before you go for that session, and kind of leave the other stuff at the door, because the coaching is probably more of the fun part. You get to see the athletes improve.
Building off of that, where do you see the field going trend wise over the next couple years? I know it's hard to predict the future, but from somebody that's been doing it for quite some time now, you've seen changes and trends. Where do you see this thing going?
I don't know, because it's like it's a race, somewhat a race to the bottom in terms of I hope we can do better job of showing our value to the administrators and the decision makers, because you see good people leaving, going tactical or going in other jobs, and there's more people that look like us that will step right into the role, right? And so just trying to impact where I'm at is what I'm focused on. I can't control what happens to the field, but I know there's good people in it. But then also I feel like there's a way to make our lives better through it as well. Whether that's just work-life balance and not guarding a desk and then just enjoying what you do. And being around good people has been, I think, key for us. We have a great staff, and every time we can have a staff meeting, and it's fun. We don't get to do it as much as we'd like, because we're all coaching all over the place, like I said, with our 3 weight rooms and in 2 buildings. But when we do, it's a blast, and it's like go to Fogo de Chao for dinner, and like not that often, because I can't afford that
can't hide money.
Yeah, no, not on the school's dime either. So I try to pass that forward as like, when you're older, or you've had more experience, yeah, I'll bring in fritters for the staff, or I'll get try to create some of those aspects where it's not just, sorry, I can't pay you more, but you have time to work another job, or, do the things you want to do within that. Is that, the 4 Ps we always talk about, is that progression may not be like another title, but it could be, you're handling more social media, you're handling this project or that project, right? So trying to create some of those opportunities for us as well.
How have you been able to best work with your athletic trainers and sports medicine staff? And how have you helped mentor your staff to be able to model that and use that, athlete-centered approach to getting them back on the field or keeping them, robust?
I feel really fortunate because both here and at UIC, we had like the best relationships. Part of it is being so close to them. So both at UIC, our weight room and training room are right next to each other. So we could talk all the time, run in, run out. Here, it's the same thing. We're down the hall at both facilities. And so it's really, that's great. And we just encourage them to meet at least weekly, talk daily. We do, Steve and Kim, who's our men's basketball athletic trainer, and I don't know if it was our idea, but we are in charge of this. We call it Common Ground. So maybe every other week, sometimes a little less during basketball season, but a meeting between all of us, the athletic trainers and strength coaches, and that's our common ground. And we just pick a body part and then go through what are the common injuries, how do we strength train it, what are injury risk reduction techniques or discussions, and then usually finish with a case study of a return to play on that area. And so we started that last spring, and then we were going to do like, a body part each session. We spent 4 weeks on the foot and ankle. So, and like we started from the ground up, and then now we're at wrist. We're not finished yet with hand and wrist and elbow. And so it's been really good to get us all in the same room, or at least over Zoom, most of us in the same room. And then just, again, that gets back to that common language where we can talk about what does extensive plyometrics mean? What are, hinging, squatting, and then vice versa in the training room. What are the modalities they're looking at? What are, their progressions for, all right, you have an ankle sprain. What's your first line of defense? What is your process? And we can kind of understand, bridge that gap from both sides. Oh, okay. That makes sense. How about I can do this in the weight room? And we talked through some of those kind of scenarios. So it's been really valuable for us.
So working within the sport of basketball and talking about the foot for as long as you did, controversial topic, bracing, not bracing, taping, not taping, the foot and ankle. What are your thoughts? What did you guys talk about with it?
Most of us are actually anti-bracing. Not anti, but like generally don't encourage it. And same thing with taping unless you absolutely need it. So a lot of we'd just rather get stronger in the muscles and the joints. And so that's generally, there are people, our athletes that will tape and will brace, but that's usually up to them. We don't make them do it. My wife thinks I have a foot fetish because I'm watching all the foot and ankle videos and, Chris Korfus and Cal Dietz spring ankle ISOs.
Yeah.
And,
yep.
So she gives me crap on that.
Have you, I forget the name of the guy's book, but wrote the book called What the Foot. Oh my God.
Yeah. Gary Ward.
Like,
I've not read it. I've only seen just through like podcasts, some of that stuff.
Yeah, no, and I mean like the whole, one of the things, we'll nerd out here for a minute, but just talking about how forefoot and rear foot actually move in opposition of one another. Like that was just a completely new concept for me. Because you and your staff talked about it for so long, kind of educate our listeners on, what happens at that foot and ankle complex, because I didn't appreciate the importance of it until 2018, maybe 2019. So kind of talk about what y'all, did during those 4 weeks.
Oh, I mean, the biggest thing, we talked about so many things, like the different surfaces people are on, kind of like, we all brought it back to too. It's like, man, it's the sport practice that matters probably the most. And it depends on the sport, but like the any like, open chain banded ankle work is like, is that really doing anything? Yeah. Okay. You could do it. Yeah. Right. But like, so we talked a lot about the ankle ISOs and some of our favorites with kind of progressions or regressions with that, but man, and if some of those mechanic stuff is too much for me. And so I haven't got into that much, because like also, can you coach it with a group of, 15 basketball guys? or 40 swimmers, right? Like how are you going to take that and make it digestible and manageable, scalable to that? So I can't have a good answer for you because I don't know. And I'm still learning about it. Like, I just got David Gray's foot and Achilles rehab course. I got it pulled up, but it's like, I really need to spend some time on this myself before I implement it with anyone, right?
Yeah, David's stuff is fantastic with, you guys had lower body basics too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So we use some of those, bits and pieces of those strategies. We had a pretty nasty patellar tendinopathy in the last year. And so really the Jake Tura's, knee protocol was huge, using that as a framework, but then taking some of that from the lower body basics helped a lot too. With some of I've used it with probably the foam roller hamstring.
Oh God,
is like
so hard,
killer. Like
especially single leg. Oh
yeah, oh yeah. And the gymnasts on that, and like just kept getting them to raise their heel, and they're just screaming. But yeah, that's one of the best bang for your buck, I feel like.
Looking back at what you've done and evolved in those 15 months, what has been the biggest growing point for you? What has been the like, oh man, can't believe I did that, or like, whew, how did I forget to do this?
I think the biggest growth point is being better at home husband, because you think about the last 3 years for everyone really, but for us personally, is we had met in 2017, we got engaged in 2019, planning a wedding, COVID pushed the wedding back a year, we got pregnant, we got married, the courthouse, had the wedding in 2021, changed jobs, moved 3 weeks, got a director, interviewed in October, November of 2021. 3 weeks later, I was living in Arlington, and then moved the family 10 days later. After that, went back to Chicago, moved up 2-part apartment across the country, drove 2 days. Our stuff was almost all this stuff, right? My wife's working from home, fortunate to keep her job that was in Chicago. So, no transition there. But like not a ton of friends in the area with some family. And so trying to balance that. She's literally in the home all the time. And so how can I be a better husband, split up, like better roommate first, right? Like just doing the dishes, taking the trash out, right? Like it's not because she's in the home all the time. She's thinking it has this running list in her head. And so for me to try to realize that and like, oh, can I take more off her plate? And it's not perfect, but it's been much better, especially with basketball travel. It is challenging. It's tough. And with football, right? It's 7 days a week. We were fortunate. I feel fortunate. The staff we have, we took almost every day off after the game, unless it was like 2 day, a shorter cycle.
Yeah.
So almost every Sunday I was home.
That's what this new coaching staff wants to do. They want to have Sunday off, right? Like that's something that I think that's actually something that I had been trying to push here for since 2020 during COVID, right? I was trying to push for that, not only for the players but for the coaches too, because that's kind of something that it was not my original idea. It was just completely stolen from Fergus. The whole notion of, hey, give the coaches an opportunity to empty the bucket of stress. Give the coaches an opportunity to figure out what they're going to tell the players the next time they see them. Just and not to mention the psychological benefit for the players. And, DeMarco's talked about the fact of, okay, if your family's in town and you can go see them and spend longer time, like just all of that, right? Like in being dynamic system human beings. Yeah,
no, I think that was huge for us, especially in our season. We had some guys out for the year and a small roster. And I think it allowed us to keep us a little fresher down the end. And same thing, the coaches didn't want to say something in the heat of the moment after the game. A lot of times it wasn't even like, post-game talk wasn't like if we won or lost, good or bad. It was like, we'll watch the film, we'll talk about it. We did this really good, on first impression, and then, all right, let's get out of here. There's not much to say after a game, good or bad, which I really appreciated from these coaches. And then, all right, watch the film and we'll deep dive into what we need to get better at and what we did well. But I feel like those things are kind of underappreciated and how teams operate. So that's been cool in the last year the first staff I was here with got let go after the season, and so having a new staff to kind of compare and contrast the good and the bad has been interesting.
Now as you are in that time where you said basketball's away, without giving away any of your secrets, but what, as you're now getting even more and more comfortable in your role and everything, they say that an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator doesn't really have their system in place until year 3, 4. You're going to start year 3 or off season 3. Like, so what's kind of been some of the things that you're getting excited to plan and trust? You know what I mean?
Really off season 2 because I came in December of 2021. And so the season was already going. Right. And so really only the second full off season and with the new staff as well. So it's really been talking with them, having a common understanding. All right, now we know each other a little bit. What are the kind of, how do we want to train, practice? So just really trying to grow their bodies and develop them in every area. Big thing for me is level up. I don't want them to be able to not do anything on the court if they need to, from every area: strength, speed, power, work capacity. So the big focus, I think, like a lot of people do postseason, is like rebuild the tissue, restore a bigger range of motion, build some muscle. And then in the summer, there's still more individual workouts. And so it's really, that's the prime: get strong, get fast time. But then, like you said, system, trying to make it a little more systematic with what are the KPIs we really need to track. I've done a lot of like record, rank, and publish with teams in the past, and brought a similar principles and philosophy in the last year, which I feel like was important to drive some of those metrics, just intent at the very least. But then now it's pulling back and seeing what are the ones that probably are the most important for them, versus doing 10 different jump tests. Can I just pick 3 or 4 and do those a little more frequently? And so that's really the focus right now, is dialing into those. Same thing from the lifting perspective. Do we need to do 10 different lifts, or can I really pick the big rocks? And then there's trying to have levels within that of foundation, like kind of stolen from Nick DeMarco. Yeah. A foundation plus, advanced plus, or do we even need 4 levels? When you only have 15 guys, or this last year 13, it's really more 3 levels. And within that, most of the stuff is the same, but it's just those little tweaks for each individual. Whether 7-footers using the safety bar to squat, another guy's using the trap bar, another guy might be split squatting, all in the same workout. But it's what's nice, having Team Builder allows us to do that pretty quickly, as you know. And then
we love you, Team Builder.
Yeah, shout out to the sponsor. So so just trying to build that more systematic, so it's more repeatable, and then it's clearer, I think, to the athletes too, of what's expected in terms of what they're trying to achieve.
No, man, I appreciate you. If anybody wants to continue to learn from you, where can they continue to follow you, whether it's on social media or just any other avenue?
Yeah, my Twitter, Instagram is the same. It's Eric Guthrie, EricGuthrie 07. On there, it's mostly, I don't know, pictures of my cat and my kid. Some training stuff, but not a ton. And then just my email is first name, last name @gwu.edu. Anyone can reach out, and love to talk.
Sounds good, brother. Appreciate your time. Have a good rest of the next phase of training with basketball.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.